Welcome back to Buffering. We are very excited this week because we are joined once again by Charlene Li, New York Times bestselling author, pioneer in digital transformation and leadership strategy, and somebody who absolutely blew us away when she joined us back in January. Charlene, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Oh, it is our pleasure. And that conversation was titled Disrupt or Be Disrupted. And it was definitely one of our most popular episodes, frankly, ever. So great episode there. If you haven't listened to it, definitely recommend going back and doing so. But since then, Charlene, your new book has come out, Winning with AI, the 90-Day Blueprint for Success. You co-authored that with Dr. Katya Walsh. It's officially out in the world and it's been making waves. So we're really happy to have you back to discuss that, as well as just talk about all the AI fun stuff that we've been discussing lately.
Yeah, excited to share.
Awesome. Yeah. So for anyone who didn't hear that conversation, I'd highly encourage you to go back and listen to that episode. Maybe don't stop now and go listen to the episode. You can finish this one and then go listen to that episode. That's fine. But for those who are here today, I mean, gosh, Charlene, so much has changed in 6 months. And as we were preparing for this podcast, we were sort of joking about how Zack and I have gone parabolic with AI since we last spoke. And, we're running multiple tools a day, sometimes at the same time. I've got, all kinds of things running in the background at all kinds of points of the day. But, we're building agents, we're automating workflows, we're creating at a pace that, frankly, I don't think would have been even fathomable to myself, certainly 6 months ago. And today we want to really pick up where we left off in that last conversation and move this conversation to be a bit different around no longer just talking about AI theoretically, but really how we're living with it every single day. So yeah, really excited to just get into the topics today.
Yeah, it's amazing. That was just a few months ago, and so many things have changed. So let's get into that.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I feel like we say this every episode, Gabe, but we talk about like when we first got started with AI versus where we're at today. And it got to a point, even with, the Google announcements a few weeks ago, it gets to a point where we're constantly evolving. I mentioned next week is Apple's, WWDC event. Everyone's anticipating what they will be doing with AI next. But it's constantly evolving. And prior to today's episode, we talked about this idea and this AI fluency. And Charlene, could you talk to us a little bit more about how you would define AI fluency?
Yeah, so I think what fluency is this flow. You are sitting in a place where you feel very comfortable with something. It just comes naturally. You don't think about it. And the analogy I would give is chopsticks. When you first use chopsticks, you look at these two sticks in your hand, like, how on earth am I going to pick anything up with this? And so it's awkward at first, but then eventually you get pretty good at it. And eventually, even after that, with a lot more practice, you're just shoving food into your mouth without ever thinking about how you use chopsticks. And I think of AI as something similar to that. And so it just gets to the place where you naturally reach for it. It becomes something that's a utility, a tool to get something done, like getting food in your mouth. And so the way I think about this is that you're fluent when you understand what AI can do, what it can't do. You know when not to use it, and you also know how to use it responsibly and ethically, and you can use it to get things done. And I think the meta part of this is that you know how to use AI to figure out how to use AI. And so that becomes that exponential, parabolic part of it. It's no longer
Gabe,
just
didn't we
doing
just have
some
that?
easy task.
Yeah, didn't we just
Right.
have that conversation last week, Gabe, of using AI to use AI? I think that was you and I.
We were talking about that, Charlene, on the recent episode we did about flipping our prompts back around to AI or even having AI write the prompt. So it's like, hey, I've got this idea. Here's all of the details. Can you write a prompt for me that's actually going to get the best result? And I think that's a really interesting point you just brought up there around using AI to use AI. But it does get you to the point where you are really fluent with it once you've reached that point.
Yeah. So, for example, I use my GPTs, custom GPTs, and OpenAI in projects within Claude. And if I'm doing something, I do something repeatedly, like, for example, a prep for podcasts. And it learns, how to do it. And then eventually I say, look, let's make this a project. So instead of a one-off chat, that's using memory for. I'm like, okay, write the instructions for the project, create a folder for this. Start putting all the sort of write ups that I have into that folder. You can reference them. And especially what was helpful for this one is I knew I used some of the examples from before in my previous podcast. I want to make sure I don't use them again.
Mhm.
Right. So just having that knowledge available in there and then being able to prep all that information in advance in a certain way. So I don't have to replicate and reprompt over and over again. But the key is having AI who's worked with me write the prompt because frankly, it understands the process I went through better because it actually did the work in the revision.
That's
So it knows how to write that process better than I could.
That's very interesting. One of the things I joked to Gabe a few weeks ago about was within our podcast, we have 200 plus episodes now. Everything's transcribed. We have the video, we have the audio. And what our software actually went back and it can take our audio or us speaking and build an AI, avatar essentially that speaks and it knows what or how Gabe and I interact and it knows what we've said. So that's kind of my next goal is to take our 200 plus episodes of the podcast and kind of do what you just mentioned there is build out this agent or build out this tool that we can then use to, build out these future workflows, build out these future episodes, think of topics and, analyze the guests that come on as well. So there's so much data out there now that we've built that I'm excited to platformatize that and build it into some type of AI agent.
Mhm.
Right. And the thing here is the AI is not only learning how I speak, it's learning how I think. So it's anticipating with each interaction how I'm correcting it and how I push it to add different points and how I keep evolving my thinking. So because it's keeping track, it's writing all these markdown files and can see how it evolves. And we have a specific thing within my knowledge graph where capture the ideas that I haven't written about before. And so when it comes time to brainstorm all the articles and the posts that I'm writing about, here are my candidates versus me kind of scratching my head, going through my notes. I just say, Find all the things I haven't written about, find me the intersections." I even have a knowledge graph, MD file that's called tension points. Like, where are the
Mm.
tensions and the contradictions? Because that becomes really meaty and interesting to be writing and exploring. So these are all ways for me to capture it. Some people call it a second brain. Some people call it a personal operating system. The more and more I use AI, the more I use it to figure out how to make my life easier so I can focus on the things that it can't do. It can take care of all those routine things like categorizing, keeping on track of things, summarizing things that are just frankly a pain to do. So I never did it.
Yeah, yes, agreed. It has certainly made it easier for all of those things that were a pain to do previously. And in when we spoke previously and when we were actually doing some preparation for this podcast, I shared a chart with you, Charlene, that was um, the AI struggle graph, basically, and that understanding that you're going to have to go through this trough of frustration when you're learning to use AI. And I feel like I was really in that place when we met in January, when we were, originally having our podcast. I was in that trough and I was trying to figure out how to learn these things, how to, best take advantage. I see Zack smirking because he knows, kind of where I was
I'm
at
thinking of
6
a
months
specific
ago.
example, Gabe, and I'll tell that story later.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But yeah, I went through that struggle and I really do feel like I'm at the other side now. And, I may not be as efficient as I was doing. Well, I shouldn't say that. I am actually way more efficient than I was doing things 6 months ago. My ability to create has just gone completely insane. And the stuff that I've been creating and the efficiency that I have doing it, I've definitely come through and kind of broken through that other side. I'd be curious, you were talking a little bit about, how this has played out in your own life. You're definitely past that trough, obviously, as well, with all the things that you're discussing. But did you feel that pain as you were going through that in your own life and in your own journey?
Yeah, I'll just talk about writing the book. Right.
Hmm.
So when I started writing the book, again, it was the summer of 2023, fall of 2023. I was using AI a couple times a day for very discrete things. And now when I'm writing, I have, again, I mentioned before, a research agent. I have an editing agent. I have a Charlene voice agent because I can't write the way I speak, but my AI can because it understands how I speak. I literally cannot write the way I speak because I write the way I write. So these are all running in parallel, depending on what it is. I have another one that tears apart things and makes into social posts that I give to my team. So I'm not writing faster. I'm thinking deeper as a result. And I would say that this trough of disillusionment, it's just from the Gartner hype cycle. Again, you usually have this like a technology trigger, and there's a peak of inflated expectations, and then you're like, oh, AI can do all these things, and then you run into this wall. And for me, that wall was vibe coding last summer, a year ago.
Mm.
It was a nightmare. Like, what do you mean I have to commit to GitHub and have a super base account? I'm like, this is insane. The back end. And
Uh,
so I hit that trough of disillusionment. I'm like, this is not ready for prime time. And it's slowly crawling out. And then Claude Cowork came out while I was taking a few weeks off in January to just take care of my parents. And I came back, I'm like, what is this thing? Claude Cowork and code. I could do all the things I wanted to now. And so when you hit that area where things just become clear, and I was able to create all these agents that could do things, and I wasn't reliant on just projects and custom GPTs and memory, that
mhm.
I could start doing things in a completely different way. And I've rewritten my chief of staff and personal operating system like 3 or 4 times now. And it's super easy. I'm like, the more and more I learn about this, I had one agent doing all of this. I'm like, no, there should be a bunch of mini agents that do this really well with very few tokens and very efficiently and constantly. And then I have my larger super agent, my conductor, my orchestrator. I'm pulling all the information out just when it needs it. So it's, again, just things that you learn along the way, right? So again, those aha moments keep coming. And the danger now is that you become so enamored with this. We call people who go through this, they can't stop using it. So it's kind of like AI psychosis or AI vampires, where they feel like the opportunity cost of stopping is so high now that they stop doing other things in their life. So I think there's the other side of too much enthusiasm that we're seeing from some people's parts, where I could keep doing this all day because
Mhm.
it does feel magical in so many
Gabe,
ways.
are you an AI vampire? I've talked to you a lot the past few months, so you have to answer that honestly. But
If you
I
ask my
feel like
wife, she would probably say yes, because there was a stretch of about a month there where pretty much almost every evening when I got done with regular work, I would grab my personal laptop and start doing some sort of AI project, because it's, I was having this conversation with somebody else today. There very much is a dopamine hit when you see something you've created actually come to fruition. And it is, I think, potentially dangerous that you get caught up in this cycle of, well, I created this. This is really cool. So yes, certainly finding balance in your life is important. And it is hard to, when you get enthusiastic about something, like I do become a bit obsessive about it. That's just sort of my personality when I get enthusiastic about something. And yeah, I feel like that was probably me over the last few months, Zach. I'm not going to lie.
well, and this is my Gabe story. And Gabe, I'm going to share, my personal insights here too, because I was in this position at one point too. But my first app I built in high school. At the time, this is back when like soundboards were popular. So it was a soundboard for this popular YouTube video at the time. It was totally just a, hey, I can do it. This is funny. It was a high school thing. But, fast forward years later now, this would have been last December. I thought I'm going to try to build something a bit more useful. And I'm going to see if I can use AI to help me expedite the process here, because to your point there, I was using in this case Google Cloud as my backend. I've never done an app on a cloud infrastructure before, so this was new to me. And at the time, what I would do is, and I did throw shade at Gabe for doing this, but I would go to Claude or I'd go to ChatGPT and say, "Here's a snippet of my code. Here's a page of my code. How can I improve this, or how can I do this specific thing with this page of code?" And who knows how many tokens later, I would get an output. I could take that, copy paste it, go into Xcode and deploy it. Well, then Claude Code came out. And this is where I started building my second app now, or my third app, if you will, which we just finished last night. Actually, I sent Gabe that my dopamine text of this is done. But I introduced Gabe to Claude Code, and that's where it understands your code base and it's working directly in all your files. You don't have to do that copy and paste. But I remember, earlier this year, Gabe was doing things and, copy and pasting, and we were on the Teams call. I was like, no, you gotta use
Yeah.
Claude Code, man. I think it's gonna make your life a little bit easier. And I got Gabe there. I got Gabe on Claude Max. So we're kind of evolving. I'm still poking around like anti-gravity a little bit now within Google and exploring this and incorporating this into more ways of my life. I don't think I'm a vampire yet. I do try to avoid that a little bit. But all this, I do want to understand a little bit too, Charlene. What shifts happen when you stop thinking about AI as a tool and start thinking about it as an extension of maybe an existing workflow you have?
Yeah. Again, it's not just, again, we're oftentimes used to using it as a separate tab in a browser. And I think that was one of the problems is that it's not something that's separate. It's ambient intelligence that's just built into everything that you do. And we're increasingly seeing it built into your CRM and your inbox and into your Slack. It's just built into everywhere. So you stop noticing it the same way you stop noticing spell check. No, this is there. So a couple things shift. Your unit of work shifts. Instead of thinking about tasks, you're thinking about outcomes. So what is the outcome I want to build here? And your collaboration changes. Instead of you're thinking about your best teammate that you collaborate with, you're thinking about the agents, S plural, that you have built to be your collaborators. And I think the third thing that shifts is your standards change. What used to be good enough is now just the floor because AI is raising it. It's giving you those table stakes that are easy to execute on and allows you to raise your expectations and your standards of what you can actually deliver. So again, it's a different thing, but I think that the risk here is that as you are accelerating, your organization may not be.
Hmm.
And that is it's a very concrete and versatile risk for organizations because they see some of these people taking off and you're moving faster than all of your colleagues, the tools that you have available to you, even your processes, and even the way you may be measuring success. So people may still be thinking about tasks, but you're past that. You're looking at outcomes now, but you're not necessarily being recognized for that. So I think that the key challenge for leaders is to understand how these super users are evolving and how do you keep up with them while bringing along all these other people who are still just entering into this space. So
Yeah.
this separation, this chasm that's growing, not just between organizations, but within people within organizations, is something that leadership needs to be aware of.
Yeah, it's there's a couple of terms there that you use were really interesting. That ambient intelligence, that's a word or a term I hadn't considered before, but I quite like that. And the comment you made about standards being raised, could not agree with you more on that. I find myself very dismissive of things that I would have built, 6 months ago as basic. And now I have a very different level of expectation for myself as I'm going in to build things. So I think there's a lot to unpack there around, like you said, that floor. And I feel like I have raised my floor because of that. The other piece, sorry, that you said there that I'd love to dig into is, this whole idea of getting an entire company on this trajectory to AI influency or AI fluency, I should say. What does AI fluency look like at the organization level? Have you seen a true organization, like a bigger company, actually getting to that point across an entire org versus at just an individual level?
Well, again, I don't think there's anybody quite out there right now. I think
Hmm.
some organizations, I think yours has Calix has done a really good job. I mean, you have training across the whole company for everyone to have this. Your leadership is very much in tune with that. Again, you're making the three things really available for AI fluency. You have the tools for people to be able to use them. You have the training, which you've done. And very importantly, you're making time for
Hmm.
people to experiment and to learn. Some people say, we frame this as experimenting and failing. I'm like, well, nobody sets out to fail. But I think there does need to be time similar to, again, practicing with chopsticks. You need to practice with AI to build that fluency. And that doesn't happen through a PowerPoint presentation. It doesn't happen in a 2-hour training course. This is more about learning Training is something that's done to you. Learning is something you do. And so you learn, you become fluent with AI because you do it, you use it, and you use it regularly. So I was speaking to a leader today, and she goes, "No, I need to get in there. I need to get in there and be messy with it. And the only way that's going to happen is if it's in my calendar, that I set time aside. And I'm also going to find an accountability buddy because this is how I move through these transitions. I've done it in the past. I know I can do it again. I just have to do these two things."
Mhm.
So this is not something new that leaders don't know how to do. We've gone through all these transformations and transitions in the past. We know what we have to do. So get the tools, get the training, get the time, the three T's in place for yourself and your organization. So organizations typically have given people some tools. They may be doing some training from the top down, but they really haven't allowed for learning and sharing to happen across organizations and within teams. And they definitely aren't making the time because they're saying, look, we have all these pressures from our work, our deliverables. Don't mess around with AI. We're not getting anything from it until you can show direct ROI. Don't do anything with it. So that doesn't help. Organizations that are thriving with AI are carving out that time, setting aside uh, full days or half days once a quarter or once every 2 weeks for people to get together, share what they're learning, learn from best practices. They're paying for people to go to conferences to learn. Again, there's a commitment to that. And I'll
Mhm.
just say this is the reason why I think it's so important. Imagine if your entire organization was AI fluent. What would that look like? What could you do? If we believe this is the future, then what are we waiting for? And so if that is the potential, then why aren't we investing as much as we can in making sure our people are fluent with AI so we can realize the advantages and the benefits from it as soon as possible?
Yeah, it's very exciting to think about that. And I on the timepiece, to go back to the conversation we were having a moment ago around the Gabe being an AI vampire, I do think that people, individuals, also have to carve out time in their personal lives to do some of these things. Yes, there needs to be a commitment from a company perspective to provide the time and the resource, whether that be, like you said, every few weeks or something like that, have a half a day or a day. But if you want to rapidly move through that trough of, would you call it the trough of disillusionment? I think I think I love that. Then you do kind of have to carve out a little bit of time on your own, and go through some of that pain on your own time. And the reality is that you're going to learn. I'm very much a learn by doing guy, and that was the thing that really helped me accelerate, was taking that time to do that.
Right. And I think, again, this individual fluency is fantastic. It's a habit, but organizational fluency is different. It's an
Good
architecture,
point.
right? And so one fluent person can compound that learning and build that intelligence for one person, but a fluent organization is something very different. It compounds across everyone all at once. And that's where you get uniquely and genuinely exponential.
Mhm.
So that's the trap that most companies are in. They go, we have a handful of fluent superpower users and this really long tail of non-users or just not fluent. Just they're basically not there. That's not an AI fluent company. That's an AI lottery. And you're hoping you got the right people to be fluent. And some recent surveys from the Financial Times, they surveyed 4,000 people and found that senior, higher paid people are rising ahead of AI, while the frontline staff are really falling behind and trying to figure it out alone. So I don't think that organizational fluency is something that's optional. I think it's the floor for everyone starting now. And it's something that I believe that we should be very, very attuned to as leaders. In our book, we are very blunt about it. Universal fluency is a non-negotiable. This is non-negotiable. You have to get your team fluent because you know eventually it's going to be required. So what are you waiting for? What kind of advantages could you get if you could invest in that? And let's be very concrete about this. What would it take to get your organization fluent within the next 3 months, within the next 6 months? What would it take? And then once you determine that, put in place the steps to do that. But if it's a wishful thinking, something that hopefully will happen just magically, uh, there's no magic wand to this. It's really about how do you drive fluency in your organization, how you define it.
So I want to talk about superhumans here in a minute, but it's graduation season. And what we've seen over the past few weeks is a lot of these tech executives in their commencement speeches be less than well received by the graduates
That's one way to put it,
on the
Zach.
topic of AI. And I think it brings the question here I just want to circle back to before I hand it over to Gabe to talk about superhumans is, do you see a widening of this gap between those who break through and those who stay stuck? Seeing this sentiment that's out there in education and higher education today?
Well, believe me, they're all using AI.
Mhm.
They're all using it, maybe begrudgingly, but do they trust the people who are building these things? Absolutely not. Why, these are the same people who foisted social media on us that are stealing the intellectual property of people to build these things. I mean, it's all the bad behavior that is there, and also leaders across the board are giving no answers to say what is the future going to look like for me. I, there's evidence again that entry level jobs are being decimated by AI, and it's because people are being short sighted and using AI to drive efficiency and productivity rather than reinvention. And again, we're in this place where we need tremendous leadership to step in right now and to promote a future where AI is doing good. And it feels like leadership across the board, across all of our organizations, for the vast majority of them, are abdicating that responsibility. And they're saying, well, it's a technology. I don't understand it. I'm kicking it over to IT. And IT goes, well, I gave everyone AI. And the CFO goes, so what's the value of this? And so people are forced to find a way to create that value. And so, like, okay, we'll cut people with it. And by all means, that is not a strategic, thoughtful way to engage your employees to use AI to be beneficial to not only the company, but for them too, as well. So
Yeah, for
I
sure.
think this moment of like, why AI, again, there's a deafening silence on the part of leaders inside of organizations, inside of government, across the board, of people not understanding how to even talk about it, how to do the storytelling around it in a different way. So there's this one story being told out there right now: AI is going
Mhm.
to take your job. That's the only story being told.
Well, then the more positive, hopefully flip side of that goes back to a conversation or a couple of conversations that we had in the January episode. And just to top those up, we talked about how you can't really cut your way to growth. That's generally a terrible way to grow as an organization, is to cut. And that's what we're seeing from a lot of larger organizations right now. And, now there's all these articles coming out about how, somebody spent $500 million in token costs because they were, putting up leaderboards for, people to use AI within the organization. And the tokens are now costing way more than the people that they fired. So who knows what's going to happen with all of that. But regardless, the cutting to growth never seems to be a great strategy. The other term that Zack just touched on earlier, and Charlene, you talked about in our January episode, but is this idea of superhumans and people who are combining the best of AI with the best of what makes humans unique and delivering this exponential value. To flip this around to hopefully more of a positive message, how are you seeing that play out? How are you seeing these people, take that, again, that unique thing that makes us human, and still leverage the technology to drive their businesses as well as, their roles forward?
Yeah, this concept of the superhuman that we have in the book, it comes in the leadership chapter, actually. Because what happens with the superhuman is that they're able to harness the incredible benefits of AI to just do extraordinary work. But they don't use that capacity, that time to just do more work. That would just be sort of creating value, but a small v. But I think a big value, capital V value, is when you invest that time and that capacity into what is uniquely human that AI cannot do. There are certain things like empathy, intuition, self reflection to improve yourself, judgment, and wisdom. These are things that we typically don't invest in with people until, they're senior leadership or something. But imagine having this across and around your entire organization where you have these superhumans who are leaning into what makes them human and investing in that. And this is the thing, the superhuman, being superhuman is a choice on the part of the people, but also of the organization and of leadership. It's an intentional reinvestment of the time. into the things that AI cannot do, these irreplaceable human traits. So AI doesn't make you superhuman. AI gives you the time and you make you superhuman. And I think that's the thing we're missing here, that these soft skills are incredibly hard. And we, in the past, just didn't have the time and capacity to do that. And we know how important it is. And we might do a little bit of it in leadership development and training, but we know it is the foundation for greatness and for connectivity, for
Mhm.
relationships, for understanding. So, and I think, again, organizations that can invest in that and do it intentionally and strategically are going to come out ahead. Just don't have an entire organization filled with superhumans.
I love that. I love the more positive spin on this. And building a word that really came to mind as you were saying that is trust. Building that trust within the organization, and having people who are helping build trust across all different levels. It's a hard thing to do. It's interesting that you had that as part of the leadership chapter, because it's certainly something that I think starts with leaders, but needs to be up and down the organization. I'm not a people leader. I don't want to be a people leader, but I do feel like I'm a leader in the organization because I'm able to be thoughtful and compassionate about how I'm dealing with my colleagues. And that goes a long way. And having the space to be able to do that and uh, earn that trust makes a huge difference for sure.
Right. Right. Yeah. One of the things that we often talk about is that for you to trust AI, for you to trust the decisions that come out of AI. You have to have that transparency. You have to have that, we call it the AI trust pyramid of safety and security, but also just quality and fairness, accountability, and transparency. So all those things need to be in place. And leading yourself is the first step of leadership. Leading yourself, and in this case, your AI too, as well. Having that strong relationship to know what your capabilities are and what they aren't. And then from there, you can start leading other people. And being able to model the way, showing other people how to lead yourself so that they can lead themselves is one of the key cornerstones of leadership. And we oftentimes forget, we think that leadership is working with other people. No, leaders create change, and that change can come in within ourselves. And
Hmm.
managers maintain the status quo. And very soon, today becomes the past. So leaders are always looking towards the future because it's going to become today very, very soon.
Yeah,
So
no
leaders
doubt.
create change, and that's the only definition of it. If you're creating change, you're a leader. And that could change, it could be in yourself, not just with other people too.
Hmm. Yeah, indeed. That actually leads us really nicely into the next question I wanted to ask you, Charlene. So well done setting us up for that. One of the other topics, things that we discussed in the January episode, was this idea of reaching escape velocity, and that really jumped out to me in that episode. We're now, and the concept here was companies who are moving with speed around AI right now are going to re, reach this escape velocity where people are not going to be able to catch them, or other companies are not going to be able to catch them. We're halfway through 2026 now. Do you see this happening? You kind of made this prediction at the beginning of the year. Are you seeing it happen with organizations?
Yeah. So the two studies that came out, so BCG and it just recently released a report. They divided the world into three buckets. 5% they called them future built. 35% are scalers, meaning they're beginning to generate value, and 60% are laggards with minimal value revenues or cost gains from AI. And the top 5% plan to spend more than twice as much on AI and expect twice as much the revenue lift and 40% greater cost savings. So that's the divide that's right there. And again, that is going to continue to widen.
Mm,
And what was interesting is that 100% of the future built companies reported deep engagement by the C suite, all of them. And amongst the laggards, that number is 8%. That's the dividing line. Are your top leaders involved in thinking about how AI is going to shape and change the business? So the differentiator here isn't the use and the deployment of the technology. It's rather the executives are picking up the use of this. And frankly, are the executives picking up the chopsticks of AI and becoming fluent themselves and leading the way into it? Are they personally involved? So I think that's a really big difference. So the paradox is that this adoption is so different between these companies, and that fluency is so different, especially at
Mm.
the leadership level.
In our last episode, we talked a little bit about pilots and projects. You mentioned don't do pilots, do the actual projects. Do you think the industry has moved past the pilot phase here? Or do you think that a lot of companies are still running these safe experiments that aren't scaling yet?
Oh, yeah. I mean, people love pilots because, hey, I don't actually have to make a choice and a decision whether to go forward with this AI. And yet at the same time, it looks great because we're piloting AI. We're making forward movement, right? We're piloting. And again, I think it's a really nice way to procrastinate the actual decision. The pilot is a psychological trap. It's not a technical one. The pilot says yes to AI without having say yes to the actual change that needs to happen when AI is deployed. So this is not just about adopting AI, it's adapting your organization when you deploy AI. So it you create a board deck, you have some things happening here, but in reality, what happens? You go to IT, like I need access to that data. Can you create these hooks for me? Well, when it's a real project and not a pilot would do that. You go to a couple other departments, like, hey, we want to change workflow. Let's do that. They go, well, when it's a real project, we'll do that, but still a pilot. Run some theoreticals here. And so it never gets anywhere. So this is about, I think when your AI work has no P&L owner, there's no deadline. These are key things about a pilot, and it's a pilot wearing a project's name tag. It's not really a project. It is not the commitment of the organization to deliver value with this. And I think the reason why people do this is, well, they don't know if it's going to work. Well, if you think it's important strategically for you to do this project, which is why, again, we start with business strategy, and then you go from there to figure out what are the projects you want to do. Because if it's important strategically, you will make it happen. You'll figure out whether we should be persisting in this area or if we should be pivoting into a different direction. But some way, by hook or by crook, you are going to make this happen. You're going to figure out a way to do this. And I can guarantee you, it's usually not the technology that's a problem. It's usually the people and the process and the organization.
For sure. Yeah. And to your point earlier about the wave the magic wand, AI isn't going to be some magic wand that solves all of those problems around the business challenges and the people challenges. It's at the end of the day, AI is a technology, and, technology changes usually come down to people problems, not the actual technology piece of it. I wanted to shift a little bit to the book, which was, I think you were kind of wrapping up when we last met. Congrats on writing a book. I know you've written many, but I just feel like that's such a gigantic task, and I can't imagine actually sitting down and writing a full book. So good job by you. It seems like a monumental task.
Yeah, it was hard. I can
I'm
say
sure.
this book was really hard because we wanted to be very specific because we were
Mm,
answering the question, where do you start to create value for your organization? And we originally started like, okay, we're just going to explain how AI works. And then we realized, oh, this is actually really hard. This is a hard problem.
mm,
Where do you start? And the issue is, what's surprising is this book is not an AI book. It's a leadership and strategy book that happens to talk about AI in the
mm,
context of leadership and strategy. And so most of the chapters are not about the technology, they're about structure and decisions and posture. The technology, there's only one chapter really focused on the technology. Actually, that's the easy part. The harder part are all the things like culture and mindset and skill sets and people and their rage and their fear and their grief when it comes to AI. And
mm.
how do you overcome that? So I think the key thing that we say in the book, and I think this is most relevant to your listeners, that you want to think big. Like start with your strategy. What are you trying to accomplish in the world? What are your biggest your opportunities? What are your biggest challenges? And then start small with a real project. And the project that breaks through, then scale it as fast as you can. So that bold vision and that speed are the ways to actually create that value. So again, if AI is a very big strategic weapon that you have in your arsenal. why are you just using it to cut a few dollars
Mm,
here and there? We should be thinking about it much more than efficiency, much more even than engagement, to thinking about reinvention. What could you do with this that
for
you
sure.
couldn't have done before? And that's the opportunity. And so that's why it's a leadership issue and
Yeah.
not a technology issue.
Yeah, for sure. And I reading the book, it quite, there is that sort of broader vision for, like you said, what can you do? What could you do with this? The other part that I did quite like about it is that it is practical in the way that it outlines what leaders should be doing over this time frame, over that 90 days. So, full title being Winning with AI, the 90-day blueprint for success. That is a really important part of this. Is this isn't something that should take a year or 2 years. What are the things that can be done in 3 months? And I quite liked how it broke down, okay, these are the things that you need to tackle first, and be very practical and tactical about it. That's something that Zach and I talk about a lot. It's, I think, easy for people to have these, big fancy visions of what things are, but at the end of the day, work actually needs to get done. And to your point around AI, it's what is the practical tactical work that needs to get done in order to be, to allow people the space to be able to use this new technology. So I quite liked that in the book, and I think there's a lot of takeaways for that people, the business leaders can take from that. I guess one question I do have is, what do you think people would find most surprising in the book, or what framework is most useful for most of the people listening to this as broadband service providers who picked up the book today?
Well, I was thinking that this one chapter, chapter 5, which is about how do you ground the use of AI in your strategy. So you start with your business strategy, you figure out those opportunities and challenges I talked about before, and then it's the focus here is that you figure out how AI can be in service of your strategy. So you don't need a separate AI strategy. You already have a business strategy. This is about AI supporting it and in creating an AI roadmap. I talked to one organization recently, and they said we have 7 points in our strategic plan. The first 6 are the usual suspects: grow revenues, and improve customer service results, and scores. And the seventh is use AI to support the first 6.
Hmm.
And that's the right way to think about this. You need an AI roadmap of how you're going to create value for the organization against those strategic objectives. And that roadmap is written in pencil, but your strategy is written in ink. And so, again, the caveat to that is as you're developing your capabilities, you may find new opportunities and want to reinvent your business, new customers that you can serve, new markets that you can move into, in which case you would want to change your strategy. But you don't do that by, again, focusing on cutting costs over here in this one department with AI. That's not how you get to that. It's really thinking about that strategy, where your customers moving towards, how can you meet your customers in the future better, faster, cheaper because of AI. So I think that was, I think, the most interesting surprise. Like, where do you start? You start with your business strategy. It's
Hmm.
something you know really well. You don't need to know anything about AI. And then you can take, literally, this is the trick. If this is the biggest opportunity, if this is your biggest challenge, put into AI, how do I use AI to solve that? And it'll give you a starting point. So, but that starting point has to be your business strategy, your strategic objectives.
Hmm.
So as we wrap up here, speaking of this 90-day blueprint, Gabe and I work every day with communication service providers. So if a CSP, general manager, CEO bought this book today, committed to that 90-day blueprint, what do you think their organization would look like on day 91?
Well, I can guarantee you they won't be transformed yet. I mean, that takes a lot of time. But the
Hmm.
difference is you will have moved from being a spectator on the sidelines to somebody who's actually doing things. You'll be moving. You'll have a plan. So 90 days is when your transformation stops being theoretical and becomes operational. And there's, again, that's the unit of urgency, not the unit of completion here. So specifically, there's going to be a one person accountable to driving that value from AI. They wake up every single day and go, okay, my job today is to make sure our organization drives value. They don't necessarily own it. They own the outcomes of that value, but they're making sure that and coordinating with people. Technology is involved, HR is involved. I mean, people are going to be, quote, owning a piece of the AI puzzle, but one person needs to be orchestrating that and be accountable and responsible for driving that value. You'd have a few strategic priorities for the use of AI, not 60 use cases. You'll have a 18-month roadmap of how you're going to use AI. I call it the 6-quarter walk of how you're going to walk with AI to create value. And you'll have this cadence set for leadership to look at, reflect, revise that roadmap. And you have figured out all the different things you have to move inside of your culture, your people, your technology, and especially your governance, your decision-making processes to make that happen. So the what you get that matters most is that you have some momentum, you have some proof points. And those are both, again, political capital that you can bring to the table, and it compounds. And that's how you escape pilot purgatory.
Hmm. I meant to mention this when we were talking about some of the specifics of the book earlier, but one of the things that really jumped out to me as well, Charlene, was this idea of who should own AI within the organization. And if I'm misremembering this, please correct me. It's been a few weeks since I read this part, but it was talking about how I think that most organizations want to hand it to the technical person in the org, and that probably isn't the right person because it is a people problem. You need to identify somebody who's going to be able to build consensus across the organization and work cross-functionally with all of these different orgs that are going to be hopefully positively impacted by this change. So I thought that was a really, am I remembering all of that correctly?
Yeah, I mean,
I thought that was an interesting takeaway.
right. I mean, your IT department is really good at doing IT, but IT tends to be more of a procurement operation these days.
Hmm.
And so that person may know quite a bit of a technology, but have they built anything recently? Are they attuned to what the business needs are across the organization? Are they a change agent? Can they bring people together so we can orchestrate how we're going to use AI? Because it impacts every single department. I mean, this is the biggest thing about this AI transformation that's different from other previous ones. The other ones were tended to focus like on social media, primarily in service and marketing, a little bit on sales. When you're thinking about mobile, it was really about the user interface and the customer facing side of things. So there, again, it's very, very different in that AI is hitting every single department all at the same time. And the speed at which it's happening is just mind boggling. So you need somebody who can keep track of all the multifaceted aspects of AI, understand that culture is probably the most important part, so it becomes a change agent, and also be technically fluent to be able to understand what's possible and what's not. They don't have to be somebody who knows how to program and code. I mean, who does? Who needs to know how to code anymore these
Yeah,
days?
nobody does.
But you need to be able to connect the dots and literally translate between IT, HR, CFO, executive team, boards, what we are trying to do together to reach our objectives. And again, that focus on the business objectives, being clear-eyed, this is what I'm here to do. This is what we are going to use AI for. That vision and that purpose to just drive value against those objectives every single day that they wake up. And realize that they don't, quote, own AI. They're orchestrating AI. They're conducting AI to make sure that it's creating that value.
Love that. Well, Charlene, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. I would definitely recommend people go to charleneli.com, go Google Winning with AI, go buy the book, go check it out. It's going to give you that blueprint for driving success and the number that still just keeps jumping out to me, Charlene, is the 60% of people that are in that laggards group. Let's go solve that problem. Let's get people out of the laggard group and up into that top 5% that you were talking about earlier. So thank you again so much for joining us. We really
Yes, thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right. And thank you, everyone, for listening to Buffer. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues. For more insights and updates, be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn.